Welcome back to Talk Today. It is 8:46. Now, murderer Jon Venables' latest bid for parole continues today in a closed-door hearing to ensure the protection of his new identity. The parents of Venables' victim, James Bulger, have been barred from attending.
Venables was firstly released on licence in 2001 after serving almost 8 years behind bars for the murder of 2-year-old James. He's since been recalled to jail twice in 2010 and 2017, both times for possessing indecent images of children. James's father, Ralph, is devastated at the prospect of his release. And speaking to us on Talk Today, our very first show last month, he told us why Venables, in his opinion, remains a danger to the public.
I could never forgive him. No. And like you say, you got children of your own, and would you want him getting out and being near your children, putting them back into the public, where I think he will do this again? Who's going to be held responsible for it? The parole board, each and every one of them who release him should be held responsible for it.
So our question this morning is, should child killers ever be granted the opportunity for parole? Joining us to discuss this is criminal defence lawyer Paul Britton, who believes that dangerous criminals should never be released, and the director of Freedom Law UK, we're delighted to have him on, Luke Gittos, who thinks a humane justice system should always recognise the possibility of redemption. Welcome to you both. I said to you off air, I struggle with this because I know his parents. Luke, opinion?
Well, our system is built on redemption, and we don't have an American-style system where sentences are just stacked on top of one another. We recognise that people can change, and I think that's a very important principle. Jon Venables poses unique challenges for the justice system, there's no doubt about that, but he is one of the most closely monitored ex-prisoners in the country.
It didn't work very well because he went back to prison twice for sexual offences against kids.
Very true, but...
Challenges to the judicial system or challenges to the British public because he might be amongst us.
So, living in a civilised democracy, we have to live with the possibility, however difficult, that people will reoffend. The opposite possibility is that we lock them up forever, and that's not what we tend to do. We recognise that there is a risk that people will reoffend, and we try to do everything we can to prevent that. But there is limits to what we can do. Jon Venables will be considered by the parole board. They will consider files of evidence and reports into the possibility that he will reoffend. If the family are unsatisfied with that decision, they can judicially review that decision, which will then go to the High Court.
Paul?
This is a system of protections which is worth having, and the alternative is draconian.
Paul, I want to be careful here because it's obviously a very sensitive issue. Ultimately, we're talking about the murder of a child. This happened when the two killers were 10 years old, so they were tried as children, ultimately. But as an adult, we know that Venables has reoffended with different offences, possession of abuse images of children.
Well, that's absolutely right. And, I mean, just going on what Luke has just said to us, what civilised society would allow these people back into the, as Jeremy said, the public domain? We're talking about anonymity. Do we not have a right to know who lives next door to us if our children are playing in the streets? What jobs will these people do, Venables in particular? Will he be a bin man? Will he come and collect our bins whilst your children are playing in the streets? Will he be a school teacher? You know, what contribution can these people make?
And that was what I was saying to you, Luke, because, and Paul's made the point, you talk about he's one of the most watched prisoners. It didn't work, did it? Here's my thing, right? And I'm really trying to keep a lid on it because I know his parents, right? You talk about a draconian society. Let me throw an analogy out there for all the do-gooders, right? There are evil people in the world, and evil people are not rehabilitatable, if that's even a word, right? Evil people who murder kids and who then reoffend when they've been given the chance to be rehabilitated twice. In my very humble opinion, the majority of this country would prefer that piece of scum to be locked up forever and the key to be thrown away. And I'm sure your principles are well meant, but I'm telling you, mate, you are missing the heartbeat of what the British public, and I think it's a shame. We did it on the show. Alex Chalk, the Justice Minister, disgraceful. He should have taken this. The parents are barred from appearing. It's a disgrace. I hope the parole board, amongst them, have a child. Because having a child, you might have an opinion. And you've got kids, and it amazes me. How would you feel taking Paul's thing? How would you feel if this was in your society and somehow, I'm just asking you, got involved with your kids. How would you live with that, Luke?
There's a saying amongst lawyers that hard cases make bad law. What that means is that when you are presented with a difficult set of facts, you don't change a principle, an important long-standing principle, in order to accommodate an uncomfortable set of facts. The High Court in 2019 found that there was an ongoing risk of Jon Venables suffering fatal consequences if his identity was made public.
Then
Oh dear,
then
what
don't
about
let him
Jamie
out.
Bolger?
Well, now you're making an argument for extrajudicial punishment, Jeremy. So think about that. You're making an argument for a society where people can take matters into their own hands. And I know you feel very strongly, we all feel very strongly about the murder of Jamie Bolger. But what we don't want is a society where people can be vigilantes to the extent that people suffer serious
Then
harm.
lock him up.
OK, so I just want to bring this to the other murderer, because there were two people responsible for the death of Jamie. The other person has been released, has a new identity and hasn't reoffended and gone back to prison. What do you say to that?
Well,
because
I mean,
the parole board would say that that was, you know, for want of a better word, a
OK, so they
success.
say that is a successful rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's possible.
So how many offenders have to reoffend, and we're talking about children right now, for it to be wrong? If you had 100 criminals and only 1% reoffended, and that offence involved a child again, shouldn't the other 99 remain in prison?
Loads of comments.
When does it become
We are
okay?
conflating two things here, which I think is really important to point out. We're conflating a murder with child sex offences, and what we should be talking. Yes, no, I understand that, but we need to talk about things legally and what can change. My opinion...
The legal system should change.
Yes, but my opinion and your opinion, no matter how strongly we feel about this, doesn't matter.
No.
Because what needs to happen is legal change, if anything is going to change at all. So what are we saying? Either that children, because he was 10 years old when he committed this crime, when both of them committed this crime, either children should be eligible for life in prison, or people as adults who are in possession of child abuse images should be in prison for life. Are any of those possible?
Well, I think, firstly, the alternative that seems to be being argued on this side of the debate is that basically we should be able to take matters into our own hands. I think that's always...
that's not what's being said.
I'm sorry, you're misrepresenting.
Well,
let me just explain to you. Yes,
what would you
emotionally
change?
I'm involved.
What would
in
you
this.
change?
Well,
What would you change?
If I was the
life
Justice
means life.
Secretary, I would throw the damn key away. I don't believe that... yes, I take Nick's point. I think it's a really salient legal point. They were 10. The point that nobody's made is John Thompson has been successful. The scum that is Jon Venables has been given 2 opportunities by a parole board who patently didn't see the sort of human being he was and let him out, and he has already done twice enough to be put back inside. You talk about public
aren't
opinion.
taken by people like you. They're taken by the parole board.
I hope the parole board
is
got a kid.
perfect.
Luke, then
I'm sure they do.
I have to
Really?
ask you, parole board, we're talking about the possession of child abuse images by somebody who's previously murdered children.
Yes.
How on earth can a parole board make the decision that this person is safe to be released into society if in prison they don't have access to child abuse images or access to children? How can a parole board possibly know how that individual is going to act outside of prison?
Well, we have to have these decisions taken in a cold and rational environment like the parole board. Now, there are arguments that the parole board could be reformed. I think there are changes that could be made. But obviously, those decisions have to be taken on consideration of evidence, not emotion. And the thing that we are doing here today is arguing for the basis of legal changes on the basis of emotion. That's always a mistake.
How can we get...
Got to be really quick. Sorry, I would love to keep this going. 10
course.
seconds. Sum it up.
What's the question?
how can we possibly have evidence that somebody is not going to reoffend if the children are not in prison?
Well, in Jon Venables' case, we have evidence that he will reoffend.
Absolutely.
There we go. Because
Guys,
the previous
I really
offence-
appreciate...
It's a no-brainer.
Listen, loads of comments. We'll do some of those after the break. Thank you, Luke. Thank you so much indeed, Paul Britton, as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Lots more still to come after the break with 1 hour to go.